Good evening and welcome to the European Parliament in Brussels for this special live talk. I'm Christoph Robit and I'm very happy to be moderating tonight's discussion. As the world commemorates International Holocaust Remembrance Day, I'm joined here on the set by the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz. President Schulz, thank you very much for having us here inside the Parliament in Brussels and for sharing your thoughts on this very important issue. We're also delighted to have on this set the lead actor of the award-winning Hungarian movie Son of Saul. Géza Röhrig, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. I know you have a very busy agenda these days, but you found the time to travel to Brussels to tell us more about the movie, but also about your perception of this important commemoration. Let me also welcome all of you who are watching us via streaming on the LUX Film Prize YouTube channel. We've prepared this talk to be as interactive as possible. You have a chance to send us all your questions via Twitter using the hashtag LuxPrize or Son of Saul EP. LuxPrize or Son of Saul EP. Please do send your questions in English, as English will be our working language today. And last but not least, let me welcome the thousands of viewers who are joining us from 8 cinemas across Europe, where the movie will be screened simultaneously in little under half an hour. Directed by Hungary's László Nemes, Son of Saul is part of the 2015 LUX Film Prize official selection. That's the European Parliament Cinema Prize. It won the Grand Prix at Cannes, the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film, and it's among the top Oscar nominees for the Foreign Language Academy Award. President Schulz, let me start with you. This is a very particular day, of course. We're commemorating International Holocaust Remembrance Day. What does this commemoration mean to you personally?
For me personally, it's one of the most important moments in the in my political work in the year. I'm a German, and I think until today it is for me a privilege as a German to be the president of a multinational, multicultural, multi-religious, in any way parliament with a heterogeneity in political opinions, in cultural backgrounds, and in history of the countries represented by the 750 members of the European Parliament. If I compare the privilege I have as a German to commemorate on behalf of the representatives of 507 million Europeans this unprecedented crime committed by the Germans coming from Germany shows for me that another world is possible, that we have drawn the right consequences from the history, and that we have a chance, my generation at least, to assure that the pledge never again, that this promise is kept. And therefore this is one of the most important days for me in my political agenda.
We're going to talk later about how you transmit this legacy, this memory to the new generations. But let me turn to Mr. Röhrig. The role you played, Saul Ausländer, in a movie, I think was very personal for you. Your grandfather lost most of his family in the camps. I believe you first visited Auschwitz when you were 19 years old, and you said it came as a shock to me. Is that right?
Yeah, actually it was soon after he passed away, and I took a piece of stone from his grave and I brought it to the ovens, thinking of all the family members I never had the chance to meet, including his older sister who was pregnant at the time, including his younger brother who was 11 years old, and of course his parents. So it was still behind the Iron Curtain. It was a much less visited museum, and I think I needed that sort of solitude. It was a snowy December day, and it transformed my understanding of the world completely. It really turned me inside out. What meant to be a one-day visit turned out to be a whole month. I rented a room in Oświęcim, and I was a student at the Warsaw University. And I kept going back. I felt like I'm not done. And I wrote my
first... So you spent an entire month...
Yeah, every day from 9 to 5.
Reflecting, remembering.
Yes, I never ate there. I only ate at night. And it's you don't have the time to really go through how many ways did it really define my life. But from Auschwitz, my first trip was to Israel instead of back to Budapest. I really first lost my faith in man, and that created a certain void, and that led me to find my faith in my tradition in God.
President Schulz, let's talk about the importance of culture, movies, literature, in remembering Holocaust. What is your thought on that?
It plays a key role, perhaps today more than in the past, in such movies. I have not yet seen it, but saw the trailer. And especially books or documentaries play every day a more important role when the witnesses are passing away. I was deeply impressed last year in Terezin, in Theresienstadt, when one of the survivors told us, you, that means our children, the children of the survivors or the grandchildren, you are still witness because you knew us, you met us, you spoke with us. We passed directly the message to you. But sooner or later, you will be witness, but not victims. And how to keep now the memory to this unprecedented crime against mankind, against humanity, alive is a challenge, because only if we keep it alive, if we keep the feeling alive, we can prevent that it is repeated. We can avoid that people here in the European Parliament who speak about the small boy at the beach in Bodrum, speak about human scum coming on our beaches. This is the rhetoric of the Nazis. The demons of that time are still alive. We banned them, but they are not disappeared. To encourage people to participate in the daily life, to ban the demons, to bring them under control, not to give a place for them to win political power. This is, when the witnesses have passed away, the role of movie, of literature, of political debate, of newspapers, of debates like our debate here. And therefore, the cultural frame plays an everyday more important role.
We're getting some reactions via Twitter. I'd like to read what Ross MacDonald from London is writing to us. I think it's a question to you, Mr. Ruig. He's asking basically, in its editing perspective, Son of Saul is a still stylized reconstruction and not a documentary. How did you approach your character, the character of Saul Auslander?
Well, without spoiling the movie, I think we can just reveal that much, that this is about the Sonderkommando, the special squad. These people were living isolated from the other prisoners of the camp. Their quarantine was where the gas chamber and the crematoria was. And the single challenge was for me, of course, is how to bridge the gap between my everyday reality and this extreme human condition that these people were forced to live under. There was simply nothing in my life that qualified as an experience to take me there. So my prime resource was literature. I read two sorts of literature. One is first-hand accounts, of course, former Sonderkommando members, mostly in the 70s, 80s, when they started to be worried to take their stories into the grave, and they came out and told in what capacity and were they in the camps. But also of the various criminal trials against Nazis, in which the judge was not so much interested in their thoughts and feelings, because self-reflection is coming after the war. These people were so invested just in surviving that what I needed to know, because our movie is One Day of One Man, 1944, October 7th, is what were they doing? And the judge was keep asking, so how did you cut the women's hair? How did you separate the gum from the gold teeth? How did you disinfect the gas chamber? And I needed those as accurately as possible, those details, because that was my reality. This movie, we wanted to convey an experience, because that's what I believe is the problem, that so many huge segments of European societies, to my judgment, are not shaken by the Holocaust. And it's not because they don't know it. They know it's 6 million, they know it's gas. It's that it's not enough to know, it has to be felt, it has to be thought. And what we wanted in this movie, didn't want to narrate history, because people learn that in school. What we wanted is to create an experience, a visceral experience, an immersive experience, in which nothing else is knowable but what was knowable then and there, in this limited way for these people. What was it like, 36 hours in Auschwitz?
President Schulz, the director of the movie, a young Hungarian director, Laszlo Nemes, declared in a recent interview that this past belongs to our present. He said, "One cannot ignore that today's civilization has genocidal temptations, and therefore the movie is important." Would you agree with such a pessimistic reading of today's world?
Yes, absolutely. He's right. The political strategy to declare yourself and your political movement as better, as more important than others. The strategy to declare yourself to what the Nazis called Herrenrasse, the better race, the master race, and others are inferior. If I'm listening to some fundamentalists today declaring my opinion, my religion, my way of life is better than the others, looking to people who say we have the right belief and therefore we kill all the others who have the wrong one, that kind of totalitarianism is still alive. And this description, temptation of genocide, look to what happened in Africa in the last 20 years, on the big lakes. This is always feasible. This systematic killings of the Nazis, this industrialization is without any precedent and was never repeated, and we should be hopeful that it is not repeated. But the temptation to kill the other because you feel superior, this is individually and from a certain kind of organization always possible, and we see some of this element in our days.
We're getting another tweet here asking, Mr. Röhig, do you think that the movie reflects on today's society fears? Does it go beyond its historical context? In other words, is this a movie about what happened in Auschwitz in 1944, about the Sonderkommandos, or is it a broader message about mankind?
Well, I have to agree both with Mr. President and, of course, Laszlo, the director of the movie. I think that genocide is a permanent possibility. And to some degree, it has become a sport almost. I mean, if you look at the frequent instances since the Holocaust, almost every continent had its own, so to speak. If you go to Asia, there is Cambodia and there is East Timor. And of course, you go to Africa, there is Rwanda and Darfur. So I think that I'm a little bit less optimistic maybe than you are, Mr. President, just because I think that, yes, on a rhetorical and a theoretical level, I think some lesson has been learned. But when it comes to, apply those very high standards, I think that the UN, let's say, the Genocide Convention of 1948 never really was able to apply. Things happen, and I don't see, to be honest, how genocide can be prevented from occurring again. Different ways, different places. But one of the things that I think I came to as a conclusion is that the world cannot become a better place without the people becoming better people. And yes, there is progress in terms of life expectancy, and we can go from A to B really fast. But when it comes to human behavior, I'm not so sure if we are any better than, let's say, 1,000 years ago.
Europe in the 20th century had two historical moments. The first half of the 20th century was destruction, killing, hate, racism, extermination. The second half, at least first of all in the western part, but since 90 in the whole European Union, was an idea as an alternative. The idea that countries and nations, instead to run against each other, instead to heat up the atmosphere by hate, by ultranationalism, that countries and nations cooperate across borders on the level of an idea that the big and the smaller ones, the richer and the less richer ones, those with a lot of people and the smaller ones, on equal footing create a frame, institutions in which they try to balance their heterogeneous interests on the basis of mutual respect and solidarity. This is, in my eyes, the second half of the 20th century, the counter-program to the first half. We developed, if you accept that word, a kind of immune system by transnational cooperation against these ultranational hatreds, leading always to war and extermination. I am not so optimistic as it sounds perhaps, because for the first time in my life, I see that exactly the opposite wins elections. That people who say, this idea of transnational democracy is wrong, let's get back to national interest. First of all, my nation, first of all, my country, the European Union is a strange thing and is against us. This is a very dangerous development, which perhaps would not lead to repetition of what happened in the first half of the 20th centuries. But I repeat my description. The demons, I call them demons, hate, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is putting in doubt fundamental values of mankind, is arising, is increasingly voted. Therefore, I sounded perhaps a little bit more optimistic, but I share your pessimism, but I would also share one thing. People know it, but they are not sufficiently mobilized. Those who preach in times of crisis hate are very mobilized. What we have to mobilize are this silent majority who believes that the peace is guaranteed and granted forever. That's not the case. Therefore, I think touching movies, you raised the question, what roles plays culture? Touching movies, emotional movies, play a key role. This is at least my experience.
What are your cultural references when it comes to the Holocaust?
First of all, my direct meetings with Holocaust survivors. Secondly, books, the memories. The third one, I read more or less in my whole life everything about the Third Reich. Started as a very young boy with a biography of a British historian, Alan Bullock, who wrote a biography about Adolf Hitler already in 1951. And from that book starting, I read more or less everything. But I have a similar experience as a 19 years old, or 20 years I was, when I visited the former concentration camp Struthof near Strasbourg. And that was an unforgettable moment for me, and it changed my whole life.
Now, I remind our viewers that you can send us your questions using the hashtag LUX Prize or Son of Saul EP, either LUX Prize or Son of Saul EP. That's on Twitter, of course, and we're getting some reactions here. For instance, someone asking Mr. Röhrig, should children and young people watch the movie Son of Saul? You described it, it's extremely immersive, extremely brutal, and that's why it's so powerful. So should young children watch it?
I think in high schools, yes. I think it's very important, actually, and I would dare to say that, I mean, before you saw the movie, I think people generally what they think is that there has been so many movies on this topic, like yet another one, what's the point? And I would dare to say that we made our movie against theirs, because I think the Holocaust has been used and abused by the entertainment industry. And I don't mean, of course, they didn't mean well. They did mean well. But we had two major problems, and that's what I think they should saw our movie, and not the existing ones.
So what is it that was missing in previous
two things.
movies?
One is that all these movies, and I've seen a lot of them, are singularly focusing on tales of survival. While we all know that 2 out of 3 European Jews were murdered in the Nazi Holocaust. So that's just not fair. It's misrepresentation. The second thing that these movies, by and large, have been made in a very conventional, formulaic manner.
Good versus evil?
In sharp contrast of their subject matter, which is everything but ordinary. So we believed with Laszlo and the cinematographer Mátyás Erdély that once you have something in such an extreme human condition as a lager, as a camp, you do have to forge a new cinematic language. The old tricks just simply don't work. And these movies, generally what they are after, Hollywood mostly, is your tears. Now, there's nothing wrong with crying, right? It's cathartic. But when it comes to the Holocaust, crying doesn't do justice, I think, to what happened in Auschwitz. You know, people love crying as much as laughing, probably even more. But you cry when your wife cheats on you. You cry when, you know, God forbid, your parents pass. But when it comes to such an enormity of crime as the Holocaust, or any genocide for that matter, I think that this experience demands a more visceral, a more existential response from the viewer.
That's what you call immersive, and that's certainly what the movie does very powerfully in my view. It's that you really step into the shoes of your character. You're shown the brutal ferocity of the regime, but also through the feelings and through some ideals, I would imagine. Tell us, how is the movie perceived across Europe? Because you've been traveling to many countries. You were in Italy a couple of days ago. Eastern Europe as well, the movie is Hungarian. Are there differences in the way the audience perceives the movie?
Huge differences. Huge differences. And I mean, it's part of it can be traced back by the different histories of the countries. I think the post-communist countries are having a much harder time to confront their responsibility. And we all remember how the East Germans kind of, you know, point their fingers to the West Germans, blaming them, so to speak, what happened. And so in case of Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, all these countries, I think there are, especially from the far right, there is some sort of a clear attempt to whitewash what happened, or to be, you know, to put it into amnesia, like change the page and talk about whatever, let's say, the suffering of the Palestinians, which of course it's a legitimate issue, but you can't draw a parallel as if a state-sponsored full-scale genocide of an entire race and a political problem in the Middle East somehow are in the magic symmetry, right? So when it comes to Western Europe, you have countries that are less connected to it, like let's say Spain. And people are flooding to the movie theaters in Spain. They're doing really well there. What I'm very curious, to be honest, is how is this movie going to do in Germany? Because right now is the safest place in Europe for a Jew to be is Germany. And I think your generation did a fantastic job in the 60s and in the 70s to ask your parents and grandparents, where were you? At the same time, I have to say I was quite surprised by the fact that Germany didn't buy this movie. And it's not released yet, and it's too early to say, but according to some of the German actors in this movie, seems to be some sort of a sabotage, at least in the press, about this movie. And of course, I wish I'm wrong, and we can revisit this, and we will, I'm sure, in April or March 10, actually, is the release date in Germany. How will the younger generation react to this in Germany? I mean, you are a German. You can tell me maybe if there is an issue with the younger generation and how they, resonate to the Holocaust.
First of all, I'm surprised to hear that the movie was not bought by the Germans. I must repeat, I have not yet seen it. I will see it very soon. But I can't imagine that there is a boycott in Germany the other way around. I don't know the reasons, and I'm very interested also, like you, to know what is the reason. There can't be a political reason. I want to raise that one of the biggest success in German movies in the recent months was the movie about the justice, Fritz Bauer, who with the Israeli justice together brought Eichmann to jail and to the process in Jerusalem. That was one of the biggest success in Germany. Well received movie. And the debate about the Holocaust and the specific German responsibility until today is a daily item in Germany. It is discussed more or less every day on a certain place in Germany, which is good and which is I would say a kind of identical landmark of post-war Germany, that the German people are conscious about their specific responsibility. Therefore, I would be surprised and asking the younger generation. There is a high risk losing that emotional relationship to the whole question that touches me from the bottom of my heart. I'm linked to that question. My children also, but my children are the children of a politician who in my household it is the everyday item. Until today I have not the feeling that in our schools, on our university, it is not in the center of the debate. But one thing is clear: as longer it is history, it becomes history. As far away a generation is from the real event, as more we are running the risk that it becomes a kind of movie item and not political reality of previous generations with an impact still today for our political responsibilities. And therefore I would encourage people to show to their children, perhaps not to the smallest one, but to their children, how children suffered in a certain moment of our history. By the way, if you allow to add one thing, exactly not too early but not too late to confront young people with that risk of violence in our daily life, in our society, is an extremely important element of education.
Absolutely. We've got 1 minute left and one last question from one of our viewers to you, Mr. Röhrig. This is from Filip Gaska, who's watching us from Warsaw, Poland, where the movie will be screened very soon. He says, Mr. Röhrig, this is a very personal story for you. Did you have any hesitations taking this role or any doubts during the shooting, during the filming?
No, not one bit. I have to say the credit goes to the director. He put this movie together 7 years of his life. And when I read the script, the concept was brilliant. He's a very disciplined movie maker. He's very involved in every aspect of movie making, technical and instructional.
And yet you only had 28 days, I believe, to
28 days.
to
It's
shoot
a
the
low-budget
entire
movie,
which is,
and that is sold now to 80 countries. Millions are going to see it for the next couple of weeks and months. And for a small country like Hungary, obviously, this means a lot. I did not hesitate, and it's not because I'm arrogant, I'm sure I am, but it wasn't the reason why I didn't hesitate. The reason was because I honestly asked, do I know anybody better to do this role? I felt like so many ways my different stages of my life and my family's life came into fruition in this role. So I would have passed it to someone if I would have had a name who could have been a better job. And because it's such a strange role, it's really an existential role. the existing routines of professional actors, I don't think would have taken them very much further than me, who is an amateur.
Geza Röhrig, President Schulz, thank you very much for having found the time to talk to us. And thank you for watching our live talk. Now, to those of you who are now in the cinemas across Europe and will be shown the film, I hope you will really find it as powerful as we did here at the European Parliament. This is really a movie one has to watch to remember the millions of victims, to remember our darkest pages, the darkest pages of Europe history, and to make sure it never happens again. Thank you. Goodbye.